This is Artificial Fear by Orlando Brew. Chapter 2, Departure. Joshua and Nastus were laughing when he first set foot in the officer's lounge. Watson acknowledged both of them, then went on to get another cup of caffeinated sludge. "I thought she was going to shoot you with that whole no-problem relax shit. You know, she don't like to be being placated like that," Joshua said, then resumed his laughter. "Crazy bitch, I tell you. I don't know how Caleb can have anything to do with her," Nastus said from where he lay on the couch. "She's actually a very nice young woman, Nastus. She just gets overly irritated sometimes," Watson interjected as he filled his mug. Both men paused to look in his direction, then at each other. "You are talking about Angel, right?" "She came through here a little bit ago, all pissed because I didn't tell her about the whole polar thing while she was out on patrol," Joshua explained. Watson took a seat at the central table and cradled the steaming mug in his battle hand as the detective spoke. "I mean, what the hell was she going to do out there anyway? If I told her she was just going to worry about things and not pay attention to what she was doing. Not that there's much going on out there," Nastus added with a smile. "I imagine she's up there right now, hovering over Caleb as we speak," Joshua said, then took a drink from his mug. "Actually, I saw her leave just now on my way up from the basement," Watson said, glancing from one man to the other. "Ah, well," was all Joshua said as he furrowed his brow and set his mug down on the table. "Caleb wants to see you and Max." "When?" "Whenever," Joshua said. "I imagine he must be up by now. Wants to do a little coaching, you know." Watson knew what the coaching would be. Something like what Will had given them. "Where is Max anyway?" Joshua looked around the lounge, as if the android should have been there. "In the training room, I suppose. He got all giddy when he heard Polar was coming and started practicing his android arts," Watson reported, braving another drink of his sludge. "Oh, don't tell me he's still spouting that shit," Nastus said with a deep chuckle. Watson nodded to Nastus in reply as Joshua looked from one to the other in confusion. "Max picked up this idea at some point that humans have their martial arts, so androids must have an art of their own." Nastus seemed barely able to keep himself from laughing as he spoke. "Since he first got here, he's been going on about it, to Watson and me. But he's never been able to show any proof of it might work." "He tried it on me once," Watson continued from where Nastus ended off. "Hit me a few times in places he felt were especially sensitive, and then I threw him out the window." "So that's why you threw him out the window," Joshua declared. "You know, Caleb and me can figure it out. You're usually so sedate. We didn't think you'd lose your temper on him or anything." "Well, my sedition has been muted by my time and punishment, I assure you. Back in the day, I would have been using Max for target practice after some of the shit he's pulled. This planet does have a way of slowing you down." Watson felt a bit of fire rise up in his processing as he spoke, but he buried it quickly and smiled at the two men. Android arts are just Max's crazy idea. "Would like to see him try that shit on Polar, though," Nastus declared from the couch. The black man was quiet for a moment then, as if he were trying to picture it, then broke out laughing in that deep manner that was only his. Watson couldn't help but smirk at the thought, even if it did mean Max's total annihilation. "Well, Carl is sending out the stat specialist, so Max is going to keep his head after all," Joshua assured them both, seemingly studying the gloss of his mug. "Either way, you'd better drag Max out of the gym to Caleb's office. Let the man do his coaching." "Better him than Bayer as a coach," Nastus commented as he checked his wristwatch. "Looks like time for me to head out. Want to get home before everything gets white." Nastus pushed himself off the couch and yawned with a full stretch of his arms. Joshua turned about to glance out the small dirty window of the gray room and nodded in agreement. "Nah, fuck it, I'll just sleep here," Nastus decided. The red light of the day was becoming brighter, and soon the half of Ranon that had been bathed by Raijin would be passed over to the white sun. "Fujin will be up soon," Joshua announced. "I still fucking hate that." "What?" Nastus said, pushing his hands into his pockets of his black nylon jacket. He lay back down on the couch with a groan. "On Earth," Nastus rolled his eyes as Joshua began, "there's one sun And when it goes down, everything gets dark and cool. I like the dark. I really do. I haven't had a natural dark in 7 years. He pushed his mug away and groaned in frustration to himself. Watson could feel bad for the man. Joshua had, after all, been on the home planet. What he had lost was greater exponentially than any of them. Watson got up and left the lounge with a mocking salute from Nastus. He smiled at the black man and took his mug with him to find Max. The android was, of course, where Watson had predicted. He waited at the entrance to the moderately sized training room and watched Max practice for a while, sipping at his sludge with a smile. For being the most basic model of an android with practically no upgrades beyond the most rudimentary strength, speed, fortitude, and longevity, Max was exceptional. At ease with his body and fluid in his movements, the android betrayed an overconfidence in himself that was almost human. However, the human's body's limits were always up for question, and the ability of one's will could make it do great things. An android's body was tested and measured endlessly before being allowed to leave the lab. It had to be. In the end, an android was a product with a warranty on it. Brax, Max, and himself were all the property of the Galaxy Police, and they would never be anything more than cops. Whether it was on Ranon or Earth, they would never be free to choose the greater course of their lives. Max danced before the model of a man, made up to seem like the real thing, to feel almost real when you hit it. Of course, if it were real, it would hit back or die. Max leaped in the air and kicked his right leg forward in a quick snap at the model's head, rocking it back on the hinges bolted to the floor to give it sway. Before his feet even seemed to land, Max brought his right fist down in a powerful hammer punch, mixing his own strength with the downward momentum of his landing. The model's head swung back, the rubber stretching to keep it together. A real man's neck would have been broken from the force of that punch. Max was good. It was just dangerous for him to know it. That's why he was on Ranon. "Hey, Max," Watson called. "Come on, Caleb wants to see us." Max looked back at Watson and gave him a thumbs up. He recovered his black uniform shirt from the floor near the window and pulled it on as he joined Watson, his feet bare. A human being would be sweating after training like Max, but luckily, they were all built with coolant systems. Watson had thought about upgrading his when he got some money, give it a little more power. Out in the desert, even an android could fry with some of the temperatures Fujin could produce. Watson liked to be ready for the unexpected. He had not been ready for Ranon, however. Max left his shirt unbuttoned as he headed down the hallway from the training room to what was once Bayer's office. His name was still stenciled across the window in the door and would probably be there for a long time. Nothing got done especially fast at the Quadrant 12 police station. Watson looked through the door window and spotted Caleb lying on the couch asleep from what he could tell. "He's sleeping," Watson told Max. "Well, knock then," Max told him. Watson arched a brow at Max and looked back through the glass to where Caleb lay. "No, we'll let him rest. He can't sleep all afternoon," Watson said. Max moved past Watson, shaking his head side to side, and knocked on the door 3 times so hard Watson thought the glass would break. Caleb rolled off the couch, startled, and then groaned in pain at his impact. Max looked back to Watson and smiled. "Yeah, that was great. You just love to scare people," Watson complained. "It's because I, myself, am incapable of being scared," Watson declared proudly as their commanding officer collected himself from the floor and came to answer the door. Caleb was rubbing the back of his head when he opened the door and gestured for them to be seated at the 2 chairs before the desk. They were seated quickly, both watching Caleb closely as he came around the desk and dropped down into the large padded chair of a superior officer. Caleb had always been a higher rank above Watson and Max, but it was odd now because he was in total control of them. The chief of a department essentially owned the androids at his station. Watson needed to realign his point of view of Caleb to this. "Watson, Max," he said to the both of them as he rubbed his head. He spotted his pistols on the desk, then looked closely at the 2 of them, as if they were not supposed to be there. Caleb slipped the pistols opposite each other in the checkered sash around his waist, and sighed long and hard, leaning back in his chair. "So, boys, I take it you know the score. You want us to play backup in case things get weird?" Watson reported directly. Yes. I don't like any of this, but I feel a little better if you two are prepared. Whether Brax helps or not, you two could put up quite a fight. With the added assistance, we might almost be able to do something. Caleb looked out his window at the brightening afternoon and sighed again, shorter this time. I'll get my equipment prepped, Watson said. Review some of the files on Polar and see if there's something I can use. I'll get my bottle harness prepped, Max declared enthusiastically. And how about you let me break out the big guns this time, Caleb? Max, as much as I fear this, I fear Polar far more. Break out your best stuff by all means. Just try not to hurt anyone outside of Polar. Caleb sounded tired and distracted. Watson noticed a red smudge across his cheek and was almost inclined to say something about it, but thought better of it. Angel had been covered in red dust from the winds, and perhaps she had left some on Caleb's face. Better not to say anything at all. Unlike humans, owned androids didn't get to have relationships. It's not like they were flooded with hormones and physical desires, which was a plus. But since they did have a level of artificial consciousness, they did seem to have emotions. Watson had slept with several real women in his life, and he had enjoyed giving them pleasure, seeing how they looked at him. For androids, sex was mostly an intellectual process, for which their body performed but derived very little to no pleasure. Pleasure was what you made it. Caleb's affair with Angel, despite his fiasco of a marriage, was common knowledge to the precinct, but the androids tended to stay out of the gossip if they could. Watson didn't understand it all that well. Better not to say anything. So he's coming here to kill Brax, Watson found himself saying. Does seem to be the reason from what I heard. Our Brax wasn't always the mess in the basement. He used to be a great officer from the records, and he helped take Polar down, Caleb said. That was the case that ruined him, Watson added. The guy's been in prison for almost 40 years, Max cut in, looking bored with the way the conversation was headed. Polar has to have some weaknesses, unless he's upgraded. I'm not worried about this. That is a good point, Max. What if he has upgraded? Caleb rested his right elbow on the armrest of his chair and held the bottom part of his face in thought. Shit, Watson faintly heard him say behind his hand. You know, Caleb, I'm sure that specialist is going to have extra information. If Galaxy Police is really worried about Polar, they'll have done a check and found out as much as they can. What really worried Watson was if the Galaxy Police didn't mind losing their dinky little police station in an effort to postpone going up against Polar again. After all, he did have a rather legendary status. True, Caleb said, still holding the bottom part of his face. He pulled his hand away and crossed his arms across his chest. Bottom line, I don't think we can stop him, but we sure as hell can try. So if the situation arises, we do our best and hope we don't die. I can't be much more straightforward than that. Watson nodded, as did Max. Without saying, Watson knew the coaching had come to an end. Max got up to leave first, and then Watson, pausing at the door to the office as Max returned to his training room giddily. Level with me, Watson began in as flat a voice as possible. If it came down to handing Brax over for all our lives, would you do it? Watson, if it came down to that, I would think Brax would give up his own life. It's what I would do in his shoes. That's easier to say when you aren't, Watson said. I'm sure things will be fine. Watson could hear the falseness in Caleb's assuring tone. Caleb didn't seem to believe it either, but it was a good way to clear the air between them. Watson nodded and left for the basement. Brax didn't look up when Watson stood before him. He just groaned that metallic whine. I'll take it, Watson told him. The battle android turned his large red eyes on him, and Watson could have sworn the color shimmered slightly in their depths. The war cell? Yes, just in case. You can install it, right? Affirmative, Brax said. Then we'll do it in the morning when I get back from my patrol. The huge, bladed head nodded. Thank you, Watson. Watson slapped Brax's good arm warmly and went to his desk. He wasn't happy about this. A war cell changed you. If he were still the way he had been, the way that had ended him up here on Ranon, he would have welcomed the power. Even androids changed, though. During the process of his arrest, Polar had managed to destroy 10 battle androids and slay 26 members of the Galaxy Police Special Forces. On his exit from the Wilkes Oliver Maximum Security Prison, Polar, with his combat systems offline, managed to destroy 6 android guards and 16 human guards, not counting the prison warden who Polar departed from his escape trajectory to locate and use as a shield and bludgeoning device. Though the warden was not killed, he was left irreversibly damaged and was a permanent addition to the hospital located near the prison. There was no video yet when Max had checked the reports on the prison break, but he was sure they would be there by tomorrow. He squeezed a round off with the practice pistol and watched it hit the holographic target in the head. Dead. The holographic shooting range was part of the training room, through a door to the right of the entrance. It was a long, dimly lit room with a small console set in the wall at one end and a set of holographic imaging devices at the other. The pistol was essentially a light gun that pinpointed shots on holographic targets, simulating some kickback, though nowhere near enough. Max did not need target practice, though. He just liked to do this when he was processing information. No one used the holographic shooting range but Max, which sort of made it his room. Androids did not need to sleep, though. They were capable of a dormancy period. When Max slept, he slept here. Brax took his dormancy periods in the basement, while Watson never seemed to be dormant at all. But Max came up here and locked the door. He would sit down with his back to the wall and set the holographic array to project color displays, then let himself switch off. He fired off another shot into the heart of a man and watched the projection fall back in a simulacrum of death. Something was bothering him, enough so that he had been unable to concentrate on his training. None of the photographs or videos that existed of Polar really mattered because the android was known for being able to assume any form. He was of the type of android people referred to as a chameleon. Not a formal category of android, but one that had cropped up as androids had been gaining emancipation from human owners. They were constantly upgrading and altering themselves to a point at which they often looked completely different from day to day. The chameleons were a rare breed that could not be explained by normal android psychology. They deviated from it. Androids were servants by creation, but the chameleons were defiant and self-possessed. Max shot a female culprit through the head and chest and watched her image crumple away. At one point, Polar had been described as a 6-meter-tall walking tank, and yet at another he was reported as having a nearly human appearance. Despite his outer changes, though, Polar's weaponry system seemed to have remained of a similar consistency. The android was riddled with laser weapons as well as explosives, some so advanced they were prototypes, all neatly stored away in its body. This made Max a little worried. He hung the light pistol on the hook beside the holographic console and sat down with his back to the wall opposite the door. Max had no built-in weaponry. Brax and Watson both carried their fair share of hidden weaponry in their body, but Max was bare. This would give Polar the edge, which made him nervous. But it also excited him. The challenge that he was going to face would never have a comparison. But what if we lose? He said to himself, surprised by the level of the question. It was a very important question that he had been overlooking since he had been told Polar was coming. Failure. Brax would surely die, and perhaps anyone else that got in Polar's way. Watson, Caleb, Chris. Max got up and pushed through the door into the brightness of the main training room, saturated by Fujian's rising light. He didn't want to think about this. His fists went to the dummy in a fury of punches, shifting in styles from high to low, but all intensely powerful. The male figure swung back on its hinges and remained there as Max barraged it with punches. There were going to be consequences to all this. He didn't enjoy the realization, but he was sure that he needed to have it. He was not the only person at the station. There were friends there, too. Max halted the volley of punching and let his hands drop to his side at ease, the knuckles scuffed slightly by the pinkish rubber of the dummy. "Max!" a voice broadcasted across the training room at inhuman volume. Max spun about with his fists up, his bare feet set on the padded floor for action. Brax ducked to get through the doorway, his left arm clutched tightly across his body. "Cannot scare you, can I?" the battle android said. "Never," Max replied, dropping his stance. "What are you doing up here? I thought you had decided to never leave the basement again." "That was your conception of my activity. I never made such a statement. the metallic voice corrected, the hulking form coming to a halt before Max. In the bright light of the Fujian afternoon, Brax's carapace seemed so worn and beaten up. The plasteel was dinged and dented in so many places that it almost looked like an aesthetic theme. The basement is merely a conducive environment to working the station computer network. No one usually distracts me there, but you. Max could almost detect a playful angle in the battle android's mechanical voice. He couldn't help but smile at Brax. So what? You came all the way up here to scare me? Yes, Brax said bluntly. Who's bothering who now? Max questioned smartly. I apologize, Brax spoke, tilting his bladed head forward. I'm kidding, Brax. Max rolled his eyes at the battle android in a way he had seen Chris do. You want to help me train? Brax was silent, perhaps considering the question. Come on, it will do you good to actually use that tank you call a body. Besides, if I can't take you down, then what chance have I got against Polar? None. Says you. Now take stance. I'm going to put a good-sized dent in that head of yours. Max shifted his weight to the balls of his feet and began to bob slowly, shifting his body about from side to side. Brax did nothing. Are you ready? Yes, Brax said. Oh, okay. Are you going to take a stance? This is my stance. Brax was standing there the way he always did, shoulders slightly hunched, left arm pulled tightly across his midsection. Oh! Max dropped back a meter or so from Brax's, considering his plan of attack. The battle android stood there, hunched over, his good arm swaying loosely at his side. Was he nervous? Max faked an advance, then dropped back to where he had been bobbing. Brax did not react. The battle android may have been timid, but he was by no means weak. Even his withered arm, though shrunken in comparison to his bulk, was still a formidable instrument against any man or weaker android. Max was a man by appearance, but he was an android by creation, and not a weak one either. He bobbed and shifted stance from foot to foot as he summarily began to circle Brax. Max was programmed with martial arts known, but to defeat a battle android with no weaponry, he could not depend on fighting styles designed against humans. At times like this, he liked to use something he called android arts. Androids possessed various pressure points, much like human beings, that if struck correctly could overload systems and at their most extremes, shut an android down. The trick was employing fluid movements to weave through devastating attacks to deliver the decisive crippling blows. Brax did not know android arts, and he didn't really have to. With his strength, one good hit could plow Max into the wall. Max drove forward, bringing Brax into instant action. The battle android moved to intercept with his massive right arm, but missed Max by centimeters. Brax's reinforced arm moved to the point where Max would have been a moment later if he had not paused and shifted to continue his dive at a reversed angle. Brax was already bringing his arm back when Max struck him with a double blow. His left palm hit Brax in his exposed right side, while his right fist struck Brax's armpit. Both hit at bone-crushing speeds that did little more than break the skin of Max's hand against the battle android's protective shell. Ideally, this was supposed to set off a power surge that stunned the android for approximately 3 seconds, enough time to land another blow. Of course, there was never another blow in their dance. Brax's right elbow struck the side of Max's head and sent it flying along to be followed by his body. A moment later, he was rolling across the padded floor in a heap. Darkness possessed his sight, and then little by little he could see the lights overhead, and Brax just at the periphery. Max, are you okay? Brax said very unassumingly, his right arm unthreateningly at his side. When Max could finally move, he made a thumbs up in the direction of Brax, his right arm slowly following the command. Sure, fine, he managed to say, though it sounded odd to him. Think we're done for today. Brax approached and looked down at him with those big red eyes. He was timid, but by no means weak. The battle android reached down, and Max felt his body easily lifted and held up, which was good, seeing as his legs would not hold him up. You okay? I didn't hurt you, did I? Max commented in a voice that didn't sound quite right. He felt Brax's hands under his arms lifting him a bit higher, so that his feet just barely touched the gray padding of the floor. I will survive. We should go down to the basement and check if I broke anything, Brax advised him. Max agreed, an error message blinking in the lower left field of his vision. The battle android walked them to the doorway and shut the door behind them carefully with his leg. He was watching the red particles of Earth whirl in the wind when the phone rang. "Caleb here," he said, noticing the way the red Earth became a deeper shade in the brightening light of Fujin. "It's Will. I'm ready to head out. Meet me downstairs." "Sure thing." Caleb hung up the phone and got up with a groan from his chair. Sleeping on the couch had left him stiff. When Caleb closed the office door behind him, he had to pause for a moment to take in what he saw. Max's slack form being held up by Brax just outside the door to the training room. "Oh, you did not break him, Brax," Caleb said when his senses came back to him. The huge battle android turned about, and when he saw Caleb, let his head hang slightly lower. "He is fine. We're going downstairs to make sure he is okay," Brax reported, his metallic tone very defensive. "How did you know it was me that did this?" "I know Max. You two coming out of the training room? We're lucky he's still breathing," Caleb explained, approaching them. "Max is not breathing, Caleb. Max is an android." "I know. It's a figure of speech. You must have heard it at some point." On closer inspection, Caleb could see that Max's eyes were closed, that his face had taken on a limp expression. He looked dead. "You knock him out?" "No. He shut down to increase the speed of his repair." Brax held Max effortlessly with his two arms, although Caleb figured he could probably do it with just his right if he chose. Max's bare feet dangled just inches above the ground, the toes rendered in perfect detail. Sometimes it was hard for Caleb to remember they were just machines. Max and Watson looked human and basically acted human, so much so that only when directly faced with it did Caleb recall. Even Brax, at times, could seem more a man than a machine. Machines were not supposed to be afraid. "I see. Well, don't let me keep you." Caleb turned about to head down the hallway when he heard a low metallic groan from Brax. He stopped and turned back to look up into those two gleaming red eyes like polished jewels. "What?" "It occurs to me that you have spoken to just about everyone but about Polar, and not yet me. Why is that?" The voice amplified from the face shield of the large head. "How do you know who I have talked to?" Caleb said, now taking on his own tone of defensiveness. "West, I have access to every aspect of the building's computer network. I see everything and hear everything that happens in this building. Bayer ordered me to do a complete overhaul on the system." Brax reported the information like a calculator spitting out answers. It made Caleb see the machine far better. "You see all and hear all. You tell me. Are you angry with me?" "Why would I be angry with you?" "Polar is coming here because of me. It is my presence that endangers this station and all of you." The main pair of antennae extending from the large plasteel head shifted up a few centimeters, then back down. "Everyone thinks this is my fault." "Brax, come on. Nobody thinks that. Besides, if it wasn't us, he'd be going after someone else. At least we have you." "I am of little help." "I know. I'm just trying to make you feel better." There was an awkward silence then, wherein Caleb took a long, deep breath and slowly exhaled it before speaking again. "Will's waiting downstairs. I gotta see him. You take Max downstairs and get him up and going. I promise we'll talk tomorrow, okay?" Brax nodded slowly, and Caleb quickly departed, the heavy steps of the battle android following. Caleb skipped down the steps 2 by 2 to get some ground ahead of Brax, then slowed down as he got to the first floor and cut out towards reception. "Angel went home," Chris announced, her eyes glued to her diginovel. The door had not even closed behind Caleb when she had spoken, her tone flat. "Oh," Caleb responded, slowing down just enough in case she meant to say something else. Chris did not speak again, though, and Caleb continued on through the reception room to the front steps of the building. Fujin's light made him blink a few times when he came through the front doors, the shape of Will Porter, a mere specter in his vision. He rubbed his eyes and finally adjusted to the bright light, squinting, the hot wind of Earth only adding to the reduced visibility. "Can we do this inside?" Caleb spoke in no particular direction. Actually, I'd like it more if we could stay out here. I have to let my eyes get used to this before it gets brighter, Will explained sternly, but warmly enough that Caleb knew if he pushed it, they would have been back in reception. They remained outside. Caleb placed his right hand above his eyes in an attempt to shade them, but it did little help. By midnight, Fujin would have everything in a white haze outside, and no one would be able to see without some sort of eye protection. Will came closer to him and pushed something into his left hand. Take these. I won't need them for now. Caleb pulled the sunglasses on and sighed with relief as the brightness was obstructed from his eyes. The tinting on the glasses was heavy. Everything looked almost as if it had been drained to soft sepia tones, with a light brown for the white of the sky. Will would need these in the later hours. For now, they were a bit much, but Caleb would take more than less. Will had on a large brimmed black hat made of a leathery-looking material, no doubt a heat-deflecting material. On top of that, he had a large brown coat of similar material with a high upturned collar, which would cover the bottom part of his face when the coat was zipped up. The hat was new, but the coat Caleb knew. It was a temperature-regulating garment worn when out on open ground. Parked before the station was a dirty six-wheeled rover with a large flatbed. "You're heading across the grounds?" Caleb said, looking from Will to the rover beyond him. The older man couldn't help but smile. "It takes a good number of hours off the trip, Caleb," the man explained. "Besides, it ain't as dangerous out there as people say." "People wouldn't be saying it if there wasn't some truth to it. Company just doesn't want people colonizing too far from the city. Makes it harder to capitalize on them," Will said, and squinted. The squinting lengthened the crow's feet at the corner of Will's eyes, those hard blue eyes that made a bright splash of color in the sepia wash of the sunglasses. "You sure you're going to be okay out there?" "I'm not the one you should be worried about. I'm the one getting away from the hothouse," Will said, punching Caleb's arm good-humoredly. "As the temperature goes up, I know. I'm sure everything will be just fine," Caleb said, assuring himself of what he said. "Really?" "No," Caleb admitted. At this, Will smiled. "Honesty is a good thing. Just don't freak out. Need a level head in all this, especially at the top. That was always Bear's problem." Will looked up at the sky. Caleb noticed he wasn't squinting as badly. After all the years of living here, the man's eyes seemed to work with the environment. "What, he had less nerve than Brax?" "Brax has got some reserves left. But Bear, he'd break a sweat over a sandstorm. If I ever see him again, I'm going to put him in his place. Just abandoning us like that. I'm glad you got the head, Caleb. I would much rather see this place under you, in a crisis, than Bear." It wasn't much to be chosen over Bear, Caleb figured, but it was still nice to know that Will had supported him. "We'll see about that in a few days if we're still here," Caleb said. Will struck Caleb's left shoulder again warmly and chuckled. "I'll get back as soon as I can with that mech, don't you worry." "I suppose," Caleb responded. "Listen, Caleb, this is some serious shit coming your way, and if I thought anyone could make this trip faster than me, I would stay here and help you. But nobody here can move like I can across this land, and we may need that mech. You don't have to explain this to me, I know." Caleb felt a little annoyed with the man, but he couldn't tell if it was because he thought he was being treated like a child, or if it was because Will was leaving. "Okay, then let's get down to what I wanted to talk about," Will said. At this point, Caleb became very curious. The sunglasses were hot on his face, Fujin beating down on his shoulders as he waited for Will to continue. "Brax can fight Polar. I know this. He's just scared." The man said the last word after a moment of what seemed searching. "I know that. What the hell do I do with him? Remove fear as a parameter of his programming?" Caleb said testily. He'd expected something serious when Will had started, but here was just more information he already knew. "Now, we don't need to get that extreme. Besides, it doesn't work in a learning system," Will went on. "Closed systems are fine, but Brax isn't a security unit. He's a full AI. Any system that can learn would eventually learn fear as the basic awareness of the repercussion to destruction." "Well, I was joking," Caleb said, a little taken aback by the man's chatter. "But I'm not. Brax is as human at this point as you and I, and he's traumatized." "Human? He's a machine," Caleb reminded the man. "He started out a machine, but his mind has learned to be more human. It's socialized itself. In doing so, it has learned the strengths and weaknesses of being a man. I don't know about that. He's man-made, Caleb said. Will was starting to sound like one of those crazy android rights activists, and Caleb wasn't in the mood for it. We're man-made too, just out of different parts. Oh, come on, Caleb. It's been a popular theory for a long time. Galaxy Police just doesn't like the idea is all, but right now, we have to deal with it. Brax is traumatized, and the only way to get him going is to talk him out of it. Caleb stared at Will for a moment, and then shook his head slowly from side to side with a low laugh. Brax needs a pep talk, or is it therapy? Will's expression dropped at his comment, and Caleb stopped laughing. Neither man spoke for a few moments, the howl of the red wind playing in Caleb's ears. Will turned away and sighed, just loud enough to be heard over the wind. Just talk to him, Caleb. Every human being has the innate ability to be a counselor if needed. Humor me. Will looked back at him and smiled again. Caleb shrugged and reluctantly nodded in agreement. I'll try, he told Will. Good. I'd better head out. That bitch up there is coming up quick. He thumbed toward the sky. See you the day after tomorrow. Yeah, was all Caleb could say. He took off the sunglasses and handed them back to Will without another word. Will took them quickly and slipped them back into the pocket of his coat. Caleb was back to squinting now, both hands shielding his eyes from the sky. The older man turned and walked at an even pace to the huge six-wheel rover. With Caleb's poor visibility under the glare, the rover looks like some sort of twisted beast, with a huge head at one end and a long, thin body held up by 6 massive legs. And Will, at the bottom of the stairs, he paused and looked back for a moment, then continued on to the rover. He looked like a cowboy. He climbed the short ladder up to the cab of the rover and pulled the circular-shaped door shut behind him, the seals clicking audibly into place. The sound of the engine erupted from beneath the cab and then reverberated along the length of the beast. Caleb waited there and watched till the rover had warmed up and the wheels had started turning. The rover quickly built up speed, the beaten metal surface of the machine becoming a glare as it moved further away. Will's advice was bothering him, and he debated whether he was going to acknowledge it or not. Brax wasn't like a man. He was just an android, a broken one. Finally, Caleb gloomily returned to reception, leaving Fujin's glare outside. Chris was watching him very closely, her digibook turned off on the counter before her. Caleb looked back at her questioningly, but she did not speak. She just sat there, cross-legged in her swivel chair. He approached the desk and raised his eyebrows at her. What? Are you worried? She said. Of course not. Specialist is coming. Everything's going to be fine, he told her, reassuringly, his tone as honest as possible. Good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one worried. She picked up the digibook and turned it back on. Caleb couldn't help but feel like that display for a moment. He just shook his head and went past the desk. See you later, Chris.